Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Extrology podcast, where we dive deep into the journeys of extraordinary individuals who inspire, educate, and entertain us. Today, we have a truly remarkable guest joining us, Pedro Couto Lopes. Pedro is not only a marketing expert and the host of the Ride to Success podcast, but also a passionate cycling enthusiast whose life has been transformed by the power of two wheels. From his early days as an artist and teacher, to founding a successful cycling holiday company, Pedro's journey is one of resilience, reinvention, and the relentless pursuit of passion. In this episode, he shares his experiences of overcoming personal and professional challenges, including his battle with mental health and the pivotal role cycling played in his recovery and career. We'll explore the stories behind his key life decisions, uncover the motivations that drove him to pivot from arts to marketing, and learn how he navigated cultural shifts and business hurdles along the way. Whether you're seeking inspiration to make a career change, looking for insights on how to turn setbacks into stepping stones, or simply curious about the power of passion, this episode has something for everyone. Join us as we discover the lessons Pedro has learned, the future he envisions, and how his experiences can ignite the endless possibilities within each of us. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Listeners, welcome to the Extrology podcast. Already a great learning experience for me in my lack of Portuguese, evidenced by asking my guest today how I might correctly pronounce his name, as he is of Portuguese origin. So I'm really delighted to welcome Pedro Couto Lopes. I believe I've got it. Did I get that correct, Pedro?
Yeah, you did. Perfect.
Fantastic. Well, I think as an Englishman, I think we're oftentimes very lazy when it comes to language, given that so much of the world speaks English. It makes us incredibly lazy. That's a broad sweeping generalization of my countrymen and women, which is somewhat lazy and unfortunate and irresponsible. But nonetheless, I'm delighted that I've learned at least some Portuguese pronunciation this afternoon. But welcome to Extrology. Great to have you here as my guest.
Thank you.
I guess, as with all Extrology guests, we like to give a bit of context, start with a bit of background. So where did you grow up and what was childhood like for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks, Lee, for having me on your podcast. I've been following Extrology for a few years now, so it's a huge privilege to be here. So thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, so I'm originally from Portugal. I was born in Porto. It's a city that many of your listeners might know. And yeah, I was a happy child. I was very sporty. I was always into sports, not hugely academic. So to give you a context, I was swimming competitively from the age of 10. I then moved on to athletics, did that competitively. I did even take part in some national competitions in athletics. I was very average, so there's nothing to shout about. But there was a competitiveness to that I had during my childhood, and I still am to this day. And kind of my progression in sports, it really evolved and into water polo, which is when I started it was a sport that had very little visibility in Portugal, and to a degree it still has. And when I joined the team to play water polo, it was like learning a new sport that I never seen in TV. So it was quite an experience, learning a new sport from scratch with a bunch of friends at the same time.
Just if I might interrupt, so apologies. I'm fascinated to understand. I guess there's a natural progression from swimming to water polo, but kind of what intrigued you about it? What inspired you about it? What interested you? What got you into water polo?
Well, it was a combination of factors. So I need to rewind the clock a little bit because I started swimming competitively, and it got to a point where I was getting bored of doing lengths on the swimming pool. So I changed to athletics. But after doing that for a few years, I missed the water. I missed being in the swimming pool. And I was roughly 14, 15 at that time. And there were a few friends that I had at school, they were started talking about water polo. There was this club that was starting in a town that I was living at the time, which is called Vila Real, a small town in the north of Portugal. And it was really a need of like, I need to go back into the swimming pool. That I feel like that's kind of where I probably will be more natural. I feel more comfortable. So that was a decision. And then kind of friends were also doing it. So, at that time as a teenager, you want to spend time with your friends. So that's what I did. And really, it opened my eyes to a whole new sport. And then I stayed, well, until I was 17, really. All whilst during this time, I was moving towns. So I was born in Porto, but I didn't always stay in Porto. I was moving to different towns in Portugal because my parents also were moving because of work. But that's a key trait that kind of stayed with me. I'm actually quite comfortable in being able to move. So change and transition, I don't see it necessarily as a challenge. So that's a key part that we might touch at some point in the conversation. But yeah, just to pin that down.
And I know that from when we'd spoken before, art has been a critical part of your life, an integral part of your life. At what point did art, or did you start to discover an interest in art, a flair for art? How did that come about?
Yeah, so that was still really very much part of my early teenage years. So whilst I was doing all this sport, and just to contextualize, I have three siblings, two of which are in very similar age to me. So growing up, we always did a lot of stuff together, mainly sports. But then at the age of 14, I started really finding a new creative avenue. I was starting to draw more, spending more time doing that, and my parents at that time really saw my interest in drawing, so they said, "Well, why don't we take you to a painting class?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I can try." So that was the impetus. I then went on to this painting class. I found a mentor and a teacher, which stayed with me for a few years, and I started to develop my creative thinking. I started to experiment, and I really enjoyed it. It was became all-consuming passion of mine at that time. From really until into my early 20s, really. And what the beauty of it is that at that time in my life, I found that I had realized something huge in my life. I find it, I mean, it sounds silly now to say I found something huge in my life, and I'm only like 16. But the reality is that until that time, I wasn't, as I said, I wasn't very academic. School really didn't excite me that much. But once I found art, creativity, and painting more specifically, everything changed. I was all of a sudden more able to focus on my studies. I have a new purpose and kind of a clear direction in what I wanted to achieve, which was to pursue art, to pursue a creative career. And that really led me to a big change when I was 15. So at this point, I realized through connections, my parents, friends, I realized that there were two schools in Portugal that focused on art education. That was a primary focus. And I said to my parents, I think I want to go to one of these schools. And this school was in Porto. At that time, I wasn't living in Porto. I was living in a smaller town, like 1 hour and a half drive from Porto. And I said, I want to go to this school. But the caveat to that is that this school, you needed specific grades to go into the school. You couldn't just apply to it and be accepted. And at that time, whilst I was still what was the equivalent year in England to year 9, I didn't have the grades really because I wasn't very academic. So my parents said, well, you need to work for it. You need to, you know, find your focus and really up your grades so that you can enter the school. So that's what I did. For 1 year, I studied hard. I focused on the subjects that I was the weakest, and over time I was able to just about scrape the entrance point for the school in Porto. But the challenge came with the fact that having to move to Porto, having to move to a new city, I had to do that by myself. So that's where this I give credit to my parents, because at that time, imagine a 15-year-old saying to your parents, I want to go and study in a school that is 1 hour and a half drive from where I currently lived. And, where are you going to stay? Are you going to be coming back and forth every day? It's a big change, even for an adult. And I mean, I remember at that time some families members questioning my parents' decision to allow me to make this change in my life. But I was very single minded about this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be, because I found my element. I found kind of my calling, if you will. So yeah, at 15, I moved out of my parents' home. I went and lived by myself, and I really thrived. School was going well. My artistic career, if you can call it, at that time was going well because I was exhibiting my artwork across Portugal, but even abroad in Spain, in Switzerland. I was entering competitions, painting competitions at that time, and I was winning prizes for my artwork. So things were going well. It, I had kind of transformed myself. Yeah, so that's kind of how I found my calling. I found that my creative nature, and I was able to focus on that and put my efforts into making sure that that was going to work. So I removed all distractions for my life at that time.
If you cast your mind back to that first day at your school in Porto, you've left. How did you feel? To your point, at any age, that's a big wrench when you leave something that's familiar and comfortable, and you step outside that comfort zone to pursue your calling. There's an element of excitement, I guess, anticipation, but there's some fear and trepidation that comes inevitably. How did you feel on that first day? The door closes behind you at home. You say goodbye to your parents. You're off into the world. How does that feel?
Well, I have to admit, it felt scary. I was all of a sudden by myself. I did go to on weekends to my back to my parents' house, but throughout during the week I was by myself. So yes, it felt scary, but at the same time I was filled with excitement about it, just because everyone spoke my language, everyone had the same interests as I did. If you imagine you have hundreds of teenagers in a building and all share similar interests, there's an energy to it, and that's how I felt. Is there was felt scared, but that was I guess I saw it as part of the process. Nothing comes easy. I mean, looking in hindsight, the power on hindsight, I was like, well, I was just a scared kid, but with the passion. But that's how you start. You just have to make the leap, or just a small step, and kind of things start falling into place. I do remember that during my first, so my birthday, my birthday when I was going through at that time, I spent it my birthday alone. So I was turning 16 and I spent it by myself, in the house where I was living, and that felt very lonely. But at the same time, I knew why I was there. So again, we come back to the purpose. I knew why I was there. When you make a choice, there are elements that there are compromises that you have to make, and that was one of them.
With that, the power of hindsight to which you refer, as you reflect and look back, what do you think you learned about yourself through that time?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, when I look back at it and when I reflect about it, one is having the purpose, having the determination to follow through on what you want to achieve and what you think is the objectives that you want to meet. So it's really having committing to where you want to go and choosing to single-mindedly focus on that. Like I said, that sometimes causes other parts of your life to fall through the wayside. But is the focus. The focus is the key that led me to go and study and move to another city. The focus is still what remains with me to this day in pursuing many other projects and businesses, is that ability to know where I want to go and figure out do I get there? Do I need help? Do I need to retrain? Do I need to seek a mentor? And kind of do that through small steps until I get there. But it's a whole part of a journey. Nothing happens overnight, so it's taking each step and with a clear focus in mind.
I think it's also an interesting insight into what role purpose and passion plays in allowing or enabling or fueling you to overcome the resistance that there might be to, say, for example, I'm not casting aspersions on your academic background, but let's say, for example, let's say maths was not something that was hugely inspiring to you, but that as an example, but that perhaps in order to realize the grades you needed to follow that pursuit and passion, you were going to have to get the maths grade or whatever the subject, science, whatever it might have been. So it's interesting when you've got that focus and passion, almost that ability to overcome that, whatever obstacles you might need to overcome become not easier, but there's more fuel, more desire to overcome those obstacles as a consequence of reaching that goal. Is that a fair assumption of where you found yourself?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And I would add that the tasks that, whether it is, I mean, you gave the example of maths, but that can be applied to any other, whether it's a task, something that you don't like to do so much. Once you have that focus, and when I had that focus, in specific example, maths actually aligns quite well with how I experience is that maths became easier because it was part of that process of getting to the destination. And I know there is a lot of people will say it's a journey, not the destination, but I say it's a mix. You have to have the destination to also to be able to enjoy the journey. We'll come back to the purpose of having to have a clear idea of where that journey might take you.
Well, I know when first we spoke, you mentioned experiencing something of a culture shock and a significant learning curve moving to the UK. How did that? Well, three questions in one, never a good premise as a podcast host, but I'm going to do it anyway. How did you end up in the UK, and how did that transition impact your personal and professional growth?
Well, so as part of my my focus, I was determined to pursue a creative career, and that was as an artist. I knew that my path was going to lead me outside Portugal, whether that was in the US, whether that was in UK. I knew that that path would have to go through a foreign country. So again, that was part of the process. In UK was really a strategic decision. I wanted to come to study UK because I saw the potential that the art scene in UK would bring to me, and the doors that we would open for my progression, and it would also validate in some way the work that I've been doing. Not is, and these I don't. I say it not in a negative way in regards to what was going on in Portugal at the time in the art scene, but it's simply as my ambition was to move out of Portugal to pursue a career in the arts. So that's what I did. I just identified the key universities that would allow me to make the leap into the UK to continue study art through a master's degree. I achieved that. I moved, but what I wasn't prepared was for the shock. Coming from a Mediterranean country, more laid back, things are more relaxed. People would talk in the street, and kind of there's a more, for me, there was a more kind of nurturing environment where people would ask how you're doing and take a keen interest in you. And what I experienced is one was that people felt to me cold and distant. The weather was cold. That's something that I still complain to this day, but that's another issue. But I think most importantly, I wasn't really able to connect at that time with British people. I was living in Norwich, and I had great ties with the international community of students living there, but I wasn't able to break through kind of the first point of interaction. I always felt at that time that British people are very friendly, but you really have to break the ice to get through to them. There is a barrier there. And until you spend time and really dedicate yourself to connect to that person, you just are there on the step door. You don't get to enter the house for the sake of metaphor. So yeah, that's the kind of the culture shock that I faced, and and that really didn't help me, because whilst I was finishing my master's degrees in Norwich, I thought of success as, this master's degree is going to lead me to a career in the arts. That was my idea of success at that time. And bearing in mind, I've been working towards this dream for almost 7 years now. So that was clear to me, and that's what was going to happen. And at the end of 2009, having finished my master's degree and starting to contact art galleries and make connections in the art world, I couldn't get through. I couldn't, whether it was getting an exhibition or have a set studio to produce my art, I was just not getting through. I was facing a lot of difficulties in getting my name just to be mentioned. So that was really crushing and really made me enter kind of my inner world and just kind of bring me down into kind of a very depressive state. So, I mean, it is an interesting period because it made me reflect that when you have such a single-minded vision of what success looks like, and then when you've been working for so long on that vision, when the rug is removed from under your feet and there's nothing to support you, there's no network of people around you, you find yourself falling. And that's what happened to me. I was just, at that time, I lacked emotional maturity to deal with, with having the realization that, oh, hold on. So this is not what is going to happen to me. So I really spent a lot of time just not really understanding what my next steps would be from that. So that was a big blow.
But I think perfectly understandable when you've been, from a respectfully, but from a relatively young age, at 15, where you've become myopically focused on this is, this career as an artist is what I'm going to pursue, and being really clear about that, and taking steps and taking action and studies and developing yourself and your skills and all that will be required to realize that dream. To then suddenly awake one day, or it wouldn't have been one day, but I imagine over a period of time, come to that realization that wasn't going to materialize. that's a tough message. That's a tough set of circumstances to overcome at any age, let alone at an age. What would you
Yeah.
have been at this point? Kind of early mid-20s, something along those sorts of lines. I mean,
Yeah, I was 21.
you're barely an adult. Our brains are still. I think I'm right in saying our brains are still aren't yet quite yet fully formed by that age. So there's a lot you're still learning, and also, again, you're in a foreign country without, I'd imagine, the immediate support network that perhaps family and friends would have afforded you. Is very isolating, and I think perfectly understandable. Therefore, that you might find yourself in ultimately a state of depression and anxiety and all that comes with it. And I think I'm right in saying, if I follow the chain of events correctly, that then cycling plays a pivotal role in your life. And I guess how did borrowing a bike? I think that's, as I recall, how the story came about. How did borrowing a bike to commute lead to such a profound transformation in your life and career?
Yeah, so it's a good question because it's one of those moments that you remember where you are. You remember, when you think of big events in your life, where is the birth of your child, whether it's the 9/11. There's those pivotal moments in your life where you remember where you are, and you kind of, it marks you. I mean, after I was going through kind of a depressive state. So like I mentioned, that was 21. I had moved already to London. I was by 22, and I was still really finding my bearings. I had retrained as an art teacher, but that still felt very time consuming. I was burdened by behavior management in the education sector, and really living in London it was consuming. I don't know if you have lived in London, but it can feel quite lonely living in London because it's a big city. There's a lot of people, but a lot of those people feel lonely, and I was one of them. So when I said about the pivotal moment is that I was lucky enough to have a friend that owned a bike and used to ride to work. And so one day, one of those days where it's like I was feeling really low, it's like I was having at that time like suicidal thoughts, and I still had conscious that I can't be like this. I need to change something. So I decided to borrow the bike just to have a way of travel to work and really just ride.
What was it about the bike that grabbed your attention, that you thought might be not necessarily a way out, but might offer that kind of transformation or change in state, perhaps, that you were seeking? You was very conscious of the need to make that change.
That's a good question because growing up, I always loved riding bikes. That was an activity that I always enjoyed with my siblings. We used to ride bikes, go to the BMX pump track, or just go and play football, and we would ride to the pitch. So that was always symbolized the happy memories, and I always had great moments riding bikes as a teenager, as a child. I really needed that kind of connection again. So I pursued that. I wanted to use the bike to reconnect with those happy memories that I had of being a teenager and enjoying time on the bike.
Was there a moment, I don't know, somebody cycles past you and it just was there a moment you recall that just saw that flash, that inspiration kind of cross your mind?
I mean, there was the moment was just being on the tube. I had to get to work. I had to take 3 tubes to underground for people in the US, or a subway, and really I was stuck, like a sardine inside the tube. And I was like, I need to find a bike. I need to see if I can do something different because this commute is dragging me down. And that was like the butterfly effect. If that kind of light bulb moment didn't happen, if the friend didn't have the bike that I could borrow, you know, I don't know where I would have been, but my life would have been completely different. So that that was pivotal, because from that moment on, of just I was basically hooked on it. I was riding for a week on my on borrowed bike, and soon after I went and got my own secondhand bike, and I was just happier. I could see myself enjoying more of my free time, but also of my time commuting to work. I was kind of released from the weights that was kind of wearing me down, and also the fact that in a way it helped me to reconnect with my creative side, because with the pedaling motion, I was stimulating my right side brain and my left side brain, and kind of the motion as well of pedaling kind of stimulates the brain. There is a kind of in psychology, that's like a kind of a treatment that's called EMDR, which focuses on the left side, right side, and stimulate the brain. And cycling, in a way, it's a very crude way of doing that, but it helps you stimulate both sides of the brain, and it helps to release as well some tension, and release the kind of something that I felt was locked in me, which is the memories of having my dreams crushed. So that kind of was riding the bike was an unlocking mechanism, and I really took to it. I was all of a sudden more confident. I was all of a sudden making new friends, because I took out of my own initiative to go and finding local clubs in London that would welcome me into riding with them. And I made all the mistakes there is in the book. I would ride. I remember my first road bike was clunky and heavy. I remember going to my first group ride in a club in East London, and I went and rode with my trainers. I rode with my backpack, but I was just excited about being able to share the joy of riding bikes with other people. And and the other aspect of riding bikes, that which unlocked for me, was really finding nature. There is the poems from William Blake, the green and pleasant land. And I discovered that I was able to go into the countryside on my own steam, find new landscapes, share that with other people, and and be better for it. So that moment, being stuck on the tube, to a few months later being able to ride with other people into the countryside, into the unknown. Bearing in mind, I wouldn't necessarily know where to go, but I trusted those people, because I felt like there was a kinship there. There was something that brought us together, which was the joy of riding bikes and just really going out explore. Yeah.
It's fascinating that something as so simple a pursuit as riding a bike can have such a profound effect. It could be anything, couldn't it? Riding a bike, going for a run, just going for a walk outside. But actually, everything that it does to have such a profound effect on your first and foremost on your mental well-being, on your physical well-being, but then also on the fulfillment and purpose that you're rediscovering, the creative side in you that perhaps has been shut down a little, or maybe just pushed to one side as a consequence of the sort of heartache that you'd experience as a consequence of having your dreams crushed. It's amazing that it just takes something. We're always looking for this, whether it's the magic pill or the technological solution that we imagine is going to be incredibly expensive to realize and maybe beyond our reach. Actually, it's something as simple. And I know you can, clearly people can and do spend thousands of pounds on bikes and associated equipment, but you don't need to, right? So to your point, you borrowed a bike from a pal to get this thing kicked off. It's amazing that something so simple can have such a profound effect.
Yeah, it just, you rightly said, it's about, I was feeling depleted, and these kind of filled me up. It's like got me, my creative brain restarted. It gave me a new sense of purpose. And the beauty of it is that you can see the tangible progress being made with every pedal stroke you're making. You can see the progress. not just the distance you're covering, but also the mental well-being, the physical shape that you're in. So it's something that you can visually see, and that's key, because as an artist, those small incremental changes I couldn't see. I couldn't see whether I was being recognized. I couldn't see that practically, and so the bike gave me that concrete and that practicality of seeing the progress right in front of my eyes.
So, what was it that led you to start a cycling holiday company? I think, how do you go from borrowing a bike from a friend to becoming an entrepreneur? And as I say, you started a cycling holiday company. What were some of the lessons you learned from running that business?
Oh, many lessons. Looking back, it's, I was happy riding bikes. I'm still am, just to make that clear. But I was happy, and the same way that I felt compelled to ride bikes and see the development that caused in me, the happiness, the feeling more self worth. I wanted to share that, and I knew that Portugal, the country of origin, had an amazing landscape to be explored. So I had an idea, which was, well, why don't I take a group of friends to Portugal and let's just ride together? So I stress tested the idea. So I took a group of friends to Portugal. I organized a cycling holiday for my friends at the time, and it worked. Beautiful. And so, okay, I did the stress test. I have it. I have the concept, and I knew that I wanted to share, kind of mix my hobby, which turned into a passion, which was cycling, and give it kind of a more meaningful purpose to me. Bearing in mind that I still am very competitive, I'm still am very driven. So somehow I find ways of identifying gaps in the market, and like figuring out, is there a business opportunity here? Is there something that I can do to better the industry I work in, or just create an experience? So the creation of the cycling holiday company was through that. I saw a gap in the market, and I saw the potential to create a business from this gap in the market, which was cycling holidays in the north interior of Portugal, which is not very explored by other cycling companies or the cycling holiday companies at that time. But there was a caveat to that. With when you have an idea, you are like, this is, I'm set on it. I can see the benefits that will bring to other people, but you don't really see everything that comes with opening a business. So bearing in mind, until this time, so when I started a cycling holiday company, I have no idea in business. I really didn't know what I was doing. I started it. I was getting people were interested in coming, paying customers were interested in coming to Portugal. But the challenges was managing of the logistics of it. And that's where kind of there was my Achilles heel. I really didn't have the experience of having to manage the logistics on the ground in Portugal. So that's where the clash between the idea and the business potential clashed with my ego, which was I couldn't see the mistakes I was making as problematic. And so the customer service area of my business, so to speak, wasn't great. The experience was brilliant, but I wasn't delivering it as best as I could. So these really let me down. And I let my ego of, no, this is great. I know this is a potential here. I know this is good. It overshadowed my judgment. So I did run the business, the cycling holiday company, and I was able to run it successfully for a period of years, but it never really materialized into a thriving business. And at the end of it, I was I was depleted. I was really crushed as well, so if you will, by the fact that I wasn't addressing the customer needs. So that's a lesson in itself: is don't let your ego overshadow where the business needs to go, the direction where the business needs to go. I mean, and really stress test the idea before you turn it into a business.
I think it's a really interesting point that you make. I mean, tremendous resilience. You evidence that, to have had one dream, then another dream respectfully, but to have those crushed. But I think it's a really important point for people for listeners to understand, is that we read so much about the overnight success. So I had an idea, and the next thing you know, someone's bought my company for, $10 million or $100 million or whatever the $1 billion, whatever the number might be. So we read of that stuff. So there can perhaps be a natural tendency to assume that that is the outcome. That you open a business and, and there behold, all of a sudden, all your dreams are realised. And that's rare. I think I'm right in saying, maybe perhaps it's a UK statistic, but I think I'm right in saying that 4 out of 5 businesses never make it past their third year, or maybe their fifth year. But I think it's the third year. So the failure rate is huge. So there is there are minimal overnight successes, but they hog all the headlines. And I think it's really important for people to understand that resilience is a necessary trait, and failure, if that's how we want to badge it, failure is almost inevitable. And so persistence is key. And I think you've got to, it's a really, really useful insight into life, because life is never a straight line. It's a series of ups and downs for everybody. In varying degrees, but everybody faces them. And it's a really interesting insight.
I mean, and the other thing is key adding to your points, and that I've experienced, is that sometimes you just have to accept defeat and learn from it. Accept defeat and take it as a learning opportunity. Yeah.
Somebody once said exactly that to me. It's only failure if you continue to repeat the lessons that you didn't learn prior. So actually, if you don't take it as an opportunity for feedback, but you just simply go again, doing the same things with the same outcome, then sure, that's failure. But if you're learning lessons, it's life. Painful though it is, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So you retrain.
Yeah.
As a marketeer, is that right? And what was the story behind that? What led you to that pursuit?
Mm-hmm. The story behind it is that through creating the business, I had to. So this is another mistake I did, which was I thought I could do everything. And you go to any businessman, any person that understands an ounce of business will tell you, no, you can't do everything. You need help. You need a mentor. Ask for help. And I tick all the boxes of what you shouldn't be doing. Anyway, that was a learning curve. But one thing that I took from this is that I really enjoy the process of branding, creating the branding for the company, and marketing, creating the marketing strategy and executing it. And I mean, that's what got me the first clients, to be honest.
A lazy assumption, perhaps, but do you think that's because it appeals to your natural kind of creative instincts, left brain bias, if you like? Is that too simplistic, or is that perhaps why you gained from it what you did?
No, you're right on the money. It's exactly that. I never really lost my creative side. I still have it. Throughout periods of my life, I neglected it, but I still have it. Is really ingrained in me. So that's the branding, creating the branding, looking at marketing and executing the content to communicate the message on what I wanted to achieve through the business. There was a creative aspect to it, and I really enjoyed it and really thrived on it. And like I said, that's what got me my first clients, I think. So it's through really addressing that and see, okay, there is a potential here. There is something that I liked. And bearing in mind that there was not many things I enjoyed. I was working in the education sector, but that wasn't giving much joy. Cycling was a hobby. I wasn't, the cycling business didn't materialize to anything. So I saw an opportunity here. I identified, well, marketing is an area that I enjoyed it. And I have now the insight to understand that you need to be able to take leaps. You need to be able to have the courage to change the trajectory of your life. As you said, you don't start in A and end in B. There is a lot of paths that lead you astray. That is a sinuous trajectory, if you will. So that was really where I identified a potential, and I pursued it. So for me was about how can I have a career that will fulfill me, will retain some of the creative aspects that I like, and will combine my interests in cycling. Obviously, I didn't start working in marketing right away within the cycling industry. That was in itself a kind of, I had to make my way there through different jobs and internships. But we come back to my single-minded focus of that I have learned through having the dedication to work and thrive as an artist in Portugal, to move countries. So that was with me, and having that resilience and determination to go ahead. Bear in mind, I was mid 30s at this time. So for anyone that is listening and can resonate with this, is that when you are changing careers in your mid 30s, it's not easy. You are having to put a pause in where you thought your life could take and refocus. There is a lot of courage that you require for that, and it doesn't come easy. I mean, when you are seeking a new avenue, a new progression in your career, and that involves having to completely change the area where you're working on, you are pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. I was pushing myself to an area that I had an interest in, but I wasn't sure if I could make in it. So it was really just a lot of determination, a lot of grit into finding what jobs, what internships, what courses can I do, and carve my path towards that. So I mean, so you can say that, like, through what I've been saying so far, is that, like, this seems to be a sinuous path of where I seem to be going in one direction, but then change towards completely the opposite direction. And when you have an helicopter view of what you're doing, all of the things, all of the paths, so where my journey has taken me is all connected. Everything makes sense. I mean, I could say that in my 20s I was drifting, and in some regard I was drifting, but all these steps are necessary to be where I am now. Everything happens for a reason.
I think that's really important for listeners to grasp, because I think in my experience, there are very few people who are so, career. Like, for example, I have a friend's son who, since the age of 12, has wanted to be a vet, and he always knew that he was going to be a vet, and he's now a vet. He's late. Is he 30 now? But he's a vet. He's qualified as a vet. And he will probably be, if you speak to him, he'll tell you he'll be a vet till the day he leaves this earth. But in my experience, that's rare. Most people, and I think particularly if you look at now, the incredible pace of technology and the transformation that is affording all of us, not only in the workplace, but in our personal lives, there are undeniably jobs that don't exist today that will be done by people tomorrow or next year or in years to come. So to have this, whether consciously or not, ability to reinvent and repurpose and retrain and redeploy your expertise almost becomes a prerequisite, I would suggest, for most people now in the world in which we find ourselves. Gone are the days where, I look at my father's generation, wonderful guy though he is, but my father was an engineer He became an engineer because his father was an engineer. He went in, did an apprenticeship, and the idea was you got a good job. And a good job then meant basically a good employer with a good pension scheme.
Yeah.
But you would then subsequently retire at 65. That world no longer, that world is gone. So actually, this is a great insight into the resilience and the thoughts and the repurposing that's required in order to get you to a point where you feel you've got purpose and fulfillment. And I would suggest there's no finish line. This is a constant journey throughout life, unless you're one of those people who goes, this is enough. But you're clearly someone who is wired a certain way, where you're driven and motivated, and you want to do interesting, fulfilling things. That requires every so often, a certain change in direction or repurposing, refueling.
Yeah, I think it boils down to curiosity. I think I am very curious. I am able to look around me and be surprised by things, wanting to know how things in different fields operate, or different knowledge. And I think that curiosity I apply to my own life. I'm not fixed in what needs to be done and what trajectory I need to take, because I've my experience has informed me through growing up and having a very fixed idea of what I want to achieve, and then having those dreams crushed. It informed me that I need to be open-minded about, and really determined to approach life with curiosity, because that's how you learn, that's how you grow, that's how you develop. And that has worked for me so far. You could argue that's the level of success of that, but at the moment I'm content in how I'm living my life.
But that's an interesting point you make around success. So I think that I want to ask a question around your view of success, if I may, but I'll come back to it. I think we have again, broad sweeping generalizations, but we have a natural tendency to quantify success materially or financially. So, and we attribute, for example, whether it's a Musk or a Bezos or a Branson, or whatever it might be, pick one of those figures, any number of other ones we could add to that, and we attribute, successful, they're successful. Then monetarily, clearly they are. I know nothing about their personal lives, but monetarily they're successful on any measure. But success is a uniquely personal thing in my perspective. So I'm interested to understand, what does success mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Success is deeply personal. It's almost, sometimes I would argue it's almost subjective, because it's so different for each one of us. I mean, success for me when I was a teenager looked like, owning things, being wealthy, in a very capitalist way. As I grew older, it evolved into having a successful career. And what did that mean? High paying job. But through all these turns in my life so far, I come to realize that success for me now, it represents being at peace with my inner self, being kind to myself, to my thoughts, and really remain curious and open to develop and grow. There is a level of stability that comes with that, being able to be at peace with myself. Bear in mind, I had quite difficult, for me, obviously, it's always subjective. It's like coming from depressive state, having suicidal thoughts. For me, success now means being calm, being at peace with my inner self, and that's enough.
Now, I now feel really bad mentioning this, because I can't think who I need to attribute it to credit them with the phrase. But an interesting turn of phrase I heard on a podcast recently, which was, this particular chap was and I'll quote him, "I know lots of billionaires who want to be Buddhists, but I don't know any Buddhists who want to be billionaires. That's a really, really interesting point. It's like we do, as I say, we naturally. I'm certainly suggesting, clearly having no money is miserable, but money doesn't guarantee you happiness. Yet we still have a tendency to attribute this very capitalist view of what success looks like. Interesting. So let's talk about your on the subject of success, your podcast, Ride to Success, which focuses on cycling and its impact on life and business. So what inspired you to start the podcast, and what are you hoping to achieve with it?
Wow. Ride to Success, it starts from the moment, the butterfly effect that I mentioned earlier on. It starts how the bike changed my life for the better. And that ripple effect that it had on my life, it drastically changed the trajectory, and it helped me to regain confidence, regain my sense of self-worth, and achieve things that I wouldn't dreamed of achieving. And the same way that I have this story that is my story, there are hundreds of thousands of people that have a similar experience, that have a story where the bike changed their life. And I think that is so powerful. The bike is a simple invention. You are powering yourself, and it gives you so much freedom. So the podcast was created to bring to life these stories, to share the stories of people that have used the bike to transform their lives, and even make a positive impact in their lives and the lives of others. So that's the core of the podcast. It's to really inspire other people to appreciate the journey that they are on, but also people can listen to it and take nuggets that can apply to their own life, whether that is to take them on a more productive, whether it is to take them on a more creative direction, or simply in a more active pursuit. And the bike kind of brings all that together. So that's what's the objective for the podcast. It comes from my own experience and wanting to bring to life these stories of people that have used the bike to change their lives.
What about your own future, Pedro? As you look to the future, what are some of the key goals or projects that you're excited about pursuing?
Well, the immediate future is to really to see and to welcome my first child. So that's the immediate pursuit that I have. In medium to long term, is really to see how the podcast grows, how it changes my life, how it changes the lives of other people. That's kind of where I see myself. I will remain curious. I will remain open. The way the trajectory of my life has been, I can't say this, I'm set for life. I can't say this is it until I retire. This is going to be my life. The experience that I have so far, he has taught me that it's important to be open, and with that comes a desire to continue to improve, to continue to learn, to continue to explore new opportunities. Really,
I think the curiosity to which you refer earlier in the conversation, that's where the opportunities arise, right? That openness and acceptance and curiosity to understand where opportunities may arise just keeps you. Who knows where it might take you? What perhaps, therefore, listeners who might feel that they're feeling stuck in their careers or their personal lives, what advice might you give them to help them find their path to fulfillment?
Wow, that is a big question. It's very personal to my experience. Is understand that change is inevitable. Understand that nothing is certain, and being aware that you need to adapt to new circumstances, a new work life, new projects, new people that come into your life. And with that knowledge, then you are able to be more flexible, be ready to welcome change, because change is inevitable. And that's really how you push yourself forward, is through welcoming change into your life.
Could you perhaps share, and you may well have done there actually to your point, but the sort of, I'm thinking of a personal mantra or philosophy that guides you in your career and your personal life?
Yeah. These are not my words, but I highly resonate with this message, which is step out of your comfort zone. That's one thing that, I mean, if nothing else, people listening to my story take from this conversation is seek out discomfort, seek out challenges, because that's what will make you grow. Being in your comfort zone, being in one lane might be great for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, that's what has worked so far. There's also another one, which is, without wanting to sound too repetitive, but is being curious. Being curious, to be open, and to be welcoming of new learnings. And if I may, for any business people, marketing people listening to the podcast, is when other people are zigging, you zag, or vice versa. Seek to be different. There's nothing wrong with that. Those are my mantras.
I love that. So where can listeners connect with you, Pedro? Where can they learn more about your work, and in particular, where can they find your podcast?
So thanks, Lee, for the opportunity to share that. I mean, I'm very present on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can find me I'm under my own name, Pedro Couto Lopes. And Right Success is available on all podcast platforms. You can find it on social media as well, and on YouTube as well.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that we'll have the links in the show notes so listeners can jump over to your show. I highly recommend it. But Pedro, thank you. It's been wonderful to have you here as my guest today. Many pearls of wisdom. I think the most important lesson, curiosity. I love that. I think staying curious is absolutely critical to any pursuit, let alone a cycling pursuit, but any pursuit in life these days. Staying curious is critical, and absolutely a versatility and willingness to adapt, a readiness to adapt, a readiness to accept that, impermanence and, the twists and turns of life. It's a wonderful story that you tell, and I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing it with listeners. I wish you continued success with everything that you have, and in particular with the pending addition to the Lopes family. Really exciting times. So thanks again for your time today, and all the very best for the future.
Thank you, Lee. It's been a privilege to be able to spend some time with you and share my story.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.